Good morning, everyone. I'm honored to be here truly with my colleague, Chairman Moran, Senator Tester should be joining us, Ranking Member Rowe, and all of the members of the House and Senate Committees on Veterans Affairs. Today, we will hear the testimony from veterans of foreign wars. And before we get started, I'd like to recognize our guests from my home state of California. Are you here? All right, thank you. We can give them a hand. Well, thank you. These annual hearings are critical, so Congress can hear directly from organizations that work with and support veterans and their families every day. This work provides insights to the challenges faced by veterans and opportunities for improving VA's policies and programs. These committees rely heavily on the veterans' service organizations to provide the voice of the veteran, to highlight for us the issues that veterans are facing across the country. And I'm grateful to the VFW and other VSOs for providing us that insight. I'm heartened to see that we share many of the same priorities, and not to steal your thunder, but I'd like to underscore just some of the priorities that we do share. Our veteran population is increasingly more diverse. We must support our women veterans, our LGBTQ veterans, minority veterans, and Native American veterans. And we must ensure that VA provides culturally competent care for all eligible veterans. We must ensure that VA provides a safe environment of care for veterans who may have experienced military sexual trauma and improve how VA evaluates claims related to those traumatic experiences. As chairman, I made reducing veteran suicide my #1 priority and adopted a comprehensive, evidence-based framework to address this crisis from every angle. Our approach takes into account multiple factors that could reduce veteran suicide, everything from lowering economic burdens to increasing access to care. Let me say it again, everything from lowering economic burdens to increasing access to care and improving crisis intervention for those at higher risk. Now, earlier this year, I introduced H.R. 5697, the Veterans Access Act, to ensure all veterans, regardless of their discharge status or eligibility for other VA healthcare benefits, have access to emergency mental health care they need without ever seeing a bill. When a veteran's in crisis, worrying about how they will pay for their care should be the last thing on their minds. This legislation is the latest of many actions our committee has taken, and I'm looking forward to working with Chairman Moran, Ranking Member Tester, and Ranking Member Rowe to pass this bill and save veterans' lives. We also must do better when it comes to caring for veterans who have been exposed to toxic substances in the course of their service. The Department of Defense and VA must better track those exposures and be better prepared to treat those veterans when they leave the service. And that is why I recently sent a letter with 77 of my colleagues pressing President Trump to take necessary corrective action and add 4 diseases to the department's presumptive list that we know to be linked to Agent Orange exposure. This will ensure veterans can access crucial VA health care and disability benefits. We are still awaiting a response from the administration. You identified concerns in multiple areas that speak to VA's information technology infrastructure, and I agree that we must ensure that VA has the proper funding to ensure a 21st century technology infrastructure to support its multitude of systems. We must also ensure that VA updates its infrastructure and its aging IT systems while making wise use of taxpayer funds. I also thank the Veterans of Foreign Wars and other VSOs for holding the line, for taking care of America's veterans, and for keeping Congress and the administration accountable to those brave men and women. And I look forward to hearing your testimony and thank you for all the work that you have done in the service of veterans and their families. I now end my opening remarks, and I would like to recognize Chairman Moran for his opening statement. Mr. Chairman.
Chairman Takano, thank you very much. It's been a pleasure to date to work with you, and I'm pleased to join you here today as we welcome the VFW to our joint committee hearing. And I welcome the veterans of foreign wars here today, as well as the hundreds of VFW members and auxiliary members who have joined us. My father, a World War II veteran, was an active member of the VFW in my hometown and its post, and I grew up having highest regard, which has continued through the years, for VFW and its members. I extend a special welcome to my Kansas VFW members, and not to be outdone by California, I need to ask them to please stand and wave so that we can recognize you. Thank you for the relationship, the friendship, and the working times that we have together, and for what you do for veterans and in communities across Kansas. Thank you to all of you from all over the country who took time away from your day-to-day responsibilities to be here, for making the trip to our nation's capital. I think it's one of the most significant days, one of the times in which I feel greater levels of hope and optimism is when I walk the halls of these office buildings in the United States Capitol, and I see VFW members and the auxiliary and their presence and their, we know that you're here, and it reminds us of our responsibilities. I indicated the other day during a hearing that I often walk down to the Lincoln Memorial for the purposes of walking by the World War II Memorial, for purposes of walking by the Vietnam Wall and coming back by the Korean War Memorial. And it is a reminder, just as your presence here today is a reminder, that those of us who serve in public office need to use you as role models. That those reminders of those walls and those memorials, not a person there served their country for purposes of Republicans or Democrats. They served their country for purposes of Americans, for their families at home, for making the world a better place. We need that same attitude and approach, and I thank you for being the role models that you are at home and here in the nation's capital. Commander Schmitz, thank you. Your advocacy, the work the VFW does on behalf of our nation's veterans is critical. Thank you for the leadership role that you have assumed. This committee is lucky to have you here today, fortunate to hear what you have to say as we make our decisions in public policy and legislation about what we can do, what we need to prioritize. My top legislative priority, unless you tell me otherwise in your testimony, is to give the VA and local communities the authority and the resources to help at-risk veterans find hope and stay off the path of suicide. VFW has consistently advocated for a focused and coordinated effort among Congress, the VA, stakeholders, to effectively address veterans' mental health needs and help prevent veteran suicide. I come from the rural part of Kansas, but I represent the entire state, rural, urban, and suburban. The challenges are there everywhere, and each may need a bit of uniqueness to find the right solution to meet the needs of those who contemplate suicide and those who need mental health services. I also want to make certain that the Mission Act, a piece of legislation that I think is one of the most significant for Congress to pass in recent time related to the VA, I want to make certain that the VA is consulting with veteran service organizations, that they're paying attention to the VFW and its members, that they're talking to Congress. If the VA fails to implement the Mission Act in the appropriate way that cares for veterans in their circumstances, we will have missed a tremendous opportunity for an improving VA. I share these goals, I know, with my colleagues here sitting next to me. These ought to be and are bipartisan, bicameral issues that we can resolve. I was asked this morning what one of my other committees was going to accomplish this year, and unfortunately the answer that I gave was one I hate, which is, well, it's an election year, so I'm not certain we're going to be able to do much of anything. Well, in this place, there are elections all the time. It's an election year seemingly every year. And if that's the excuse that we can't do something because it's an election year, then we will be unable to do anything always. That's a terrible outcome. It's a terrible outcome for the American people. It's a terrible outcome for those who served our country and sacrificed that the democracy can work. The person I was talking to said, well, it's a good thing that you chair the Veterans Committee because that's still the one place where Republicans and Democrats get along. And we need to make certain that that's true and that it continues. And I pledge to Chairman Takano and to my colleagues here, certainly to Senator Tester, my ranking member, our ranking member of our Veterans Committee, that needs to remain true, and we owe it to you, those who are present with us today. Commander Schmitz, we look forward to your presentation. I look forward to working together with you. I enjoyed joining the VFW when you had your convention in Kansas City a year ago, and I look forward to your return. We are honored that Kansas City, now President Trump would say it's probably in Kansas, but the Kansas City, Missouri is the home of the national headquarters for the VFW. Just like we hold dear and own the Chiefs, we look at your presence in Kansas City as being in Kansas. And we're delighted that that presence exists. And we know that you bring from the heartland and across the country a message for us today, and I look forward to hearing it. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairman Moran. I now call on Ranking Member Dr. Rowe for his opening statement.
Thank you, Chairman. Welcome, Commander Schmitz and VFW members and members of the VFW Auxiliary, the people who do all the work. It's a pleasure. It is a distinct pleasure for me to be here today with Chairman Moran and Takano and Ranking Member Tester, all good friends at the joint hearing today, and I appreciate your attendance. It's been an honor and a privilege for me to attend these hearings for a dozen years that I've spent in Congress, but this will be the last time to be with you because I'm retiring at the end of this year, and I've realized what a good politician I am because I made, in my district, some of the Republicans and all the Democrats happy by my retirement. So I look out here, and I'm going to veer from my notes just a minute and tell you that as a veteran, the 2nd Infantry Division, I was in the Army 47 years ago. And I look out here at this group of men and women, and you are the reason we have a free country. I was able to be raised on a small farm, very small farm in Tennessee, to be able to go to medical school and to be able to serve this great nation. You're the reason that I was able to do that, because we are free because of the sacrifice that each one of you made for this country, and you continue to make because you continue to come here every year and pack this room and advocate for me, for the people I will never be able to do enough for. I got home with absolutely no injuries at all. I feel, at least some people think I was injured, but I think I'm fine. But so many people came home with catastrophic injuries. I can't do enough for those men and women who served this country and sacrificed and changed their entire life because of their service to our great nation. So I thank you for what you've done, and I appreciate your service and your continued service to the country years after many of you left the military. And it's because of organizations like the VFW that my time in Congress has been so fulfilling, and I know that I'm leaving this town in very good hands. The men and women of VFW, and thousands of whom are veterans themselves, work tirelessly to care for those who bear the wounds of war and empower them to succeed. And before I continue with my opening remarks, I'd like to take a moment personally to thank each and every one of you for your sacrifice. I want to welcome the VFW's national leadership team. It's a pleasure to have you all in the Capitol, and I want to also extend a special welcome to your Commander-in-Chief, William Doc Schmitz. We're very glad to have you here. Sir, thank you for your service to our nation in the Navy and for your leadership within the VFW and for being with us today. And I also want to acknowledge, as I did previously, the members of the Auxiliary. Thank you all for being here. Many of you wear many hats, as spouses, as volunteers, as caregivers, and many more. And your service to those who have served our country does not go unnoticed, and I thank all of you for that. Finally, I want to say a special hello for the VFW members in my home state of Tennessee. If you're in the audience, please hold your hand up or stand if you can. I know they're here because I have a list of you. Yep. We're undergoing a tough time in Tennessee right now. We've lost at least 25 of our citizens in a terrible tornado around Nashville, so please keep us in your prayers. For over 100 years, the VFW has been a leading voice for our nation's veterans, and with VFW support, the VA has undergone a transformation. Veterans have greater access to care, greater control over their health care decisions at VA than ever before. Veterans can use their GI Bill benefits whenever they choose. Veterans' unemployment has reached near record lows. Veterans are getting their appeals for disability compensation decided faster and more efficiently. Veterans of the Blue Water Navy are finally receiving the benefits they've earned. The widow's tax on dependents and indemnity compensation benefits has been repealed. Fewer veterans are homeless. Fewer veterans are dependent on opioids. The VA has more funding and more staff and is now one of the top 6 best places to work in the federal government. This success is due to sustained bipartisan congressional commitment to prioritize veterans' needs, the veteran-first focus of the Trump administration, and the continued advocacy of organizations like the VFW. VFW leaders here in Washington continue to provide valuable information and feedback to Congress to help us ensure that veterans can achieve their full potential. A great example of the importance of our partnership with the VFW actually occurred during last year's joint hearings. As we were sitting before the VFW and other VSOs to hear your testimony, the House was preparing to vote on and pass H.R. 1112. H.R. 1112 has the potential to add names of over 1.7 million veterans with a service-connected adjudication by VA of mental issues to the FBI's NICS list. If this bill were enacted in its current form, those veterans could be barred from possessing or purchasing a firearm. It's unfair to assume that just because a veteran has a mental health condition that they are a danger to themselves or others. Equating the threat of violence with a mental health diagnosis reinforces dangerous stereotypes and stigma against those with mental illness that can prevent them from getting the help and increase feelings of shame, isolation, and suicidal ideation. Moreover, any decision that would infringe on a veteran's constitutional right should be handled by a judiciary authority and not a VA bureaucrat. I'd like to thank the VFW for bringing the unintended consequences of 1112 to the Judiciary Chairman Nadler's attention prior to the House passage of this bill. Due to the VFW's actions, Chairman Nadler committed to addressing the injustice of H.R. 1112 would cause for our nation's veterans. Regrettably, it's been a year since the VFW raised these issues, and I've yet to see any proposals from the House majority that would correct this problem. As you can see, our work is not over, but I know that the VFW will continue to be a strong advocate for protecting veterans' Second Amendment rights, and that together we'll be able to keep building our successes for our nation's veterans and their families. I salute you, and Mr. Chairman, I yield back.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. I now call on Ranking Member Senator Tester for his opening comments.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, and I want to say good afternoon to everybody that's in the room. Commander Schmitz, I am honored to have you and your leadership team with us today. You are very well served by your legislative service folks. I can't tell you how much that my team and I depend upon their advice and their perspective. Representative Rowe, I just want to tell you that, and it was the same with Senator Corker from your state, this is one Democrat that's not happy with your retirement, okay? Look, I want to take a moment to recognize the Montanans in the room here today, and I hope they're in the room and not in the ante-room as with the Legion Chairman Moran. Tom Johnson, Harold Wheeler, Tim Peters, could you guys stand up? Ron Merwin, Jack Hawley, Art Whittam, and his wife Marilyn. Thanks, guys. I'm just going to tell you on a side note, yesterday they were in my office and we were talking about the priorities of the VFW, and these folks presented me with a plaque. Many of you know, because I've brought it out in previous hearings, that as a junior high and high school student, I played taps at many a funeral. They gave me a tap with a bugle, a plaque with a bugle on it, and it even works. I played the plaque yesterday, guys. I want to thank you, though, everybody in the room, including my friends from Montana, for the work that you do for your individual states and for the nation. Commander, I've said this many times before, and it's true today as it was when I've said it previously. We are here because Congress needs to take its cues from you. VFW members are the beneficiaries of VA health care, and they utilize its programs every day. You know better than any one of us sitting at this dais how the VA is performing nationwide and the improvements that should be made on behalf of the families and the veterans. We hold these hearings because only VSOs can help Congress focus on what veterans need and how to make sure that the VA is equipped to deliver those needs. Commander Schmitz, I need to hear from the VA whether the VA is operating in a transparent manner as they execute the largest overhaul of veterans health care in a generation, that is the VA Mission Act. I need to know your views on gender disparities at the VA and what Congress can do to push the VA to provide more equitable treatment of our women veterans. I need to know how toxic exposure impacts your members, from Agent Orange presumptive conditions to burn pits. When it comes to mental health treatment and suicide prevention, I need to know where the VA is doing a good job and where they need to improve. As you know, a lot was accomplished last year for veterans, including passage of the VA Mission Act, Peel's modernization, the Colmery GI Bill, that list goes on. It is imperative that the VA provide regular opportunities to hear from the VFW and other groups about implementing these laws. VA needs to better understand how the decision it makes will affect veterans as they receive veterans benefits. And the VA can't gain an understanding unless it listens to veterans. Commander Schmitz, we're here to listen to you. The voice of you and your members provide is an important source of information as we attempt to do right by all veterans. I want to welcome you again. I want to thank you for what you and your organization do on behalf of disabled veterans, on behalf of veterans and their families. Thank you for being here.
Thank you, Ranking Member Tester. Now, I would like to recognize VFW Executive Director B.J. Lawrence to introduce the VFW leadership. Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you. Members of the Senate and House Veterans Affairs Committees, I am honored to have the privilege of introducing the national officers of the VFW and Auxiliary. Mr. Chairman, please allow me to ask those introduced to please remain standing, and I wish to request the audience to hold its applause until all have been introduced. From our Auxiliary to the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, our National President, Peggy Hahaki from Hawaii. Auxiliary Senior Vice President, Sandra Onswetter of Michigan. Auxiliary Junior Vice President, Gene Hamill from Florida. Auxiliary National Secretary Treasurer, Ann Pantelikas from Connecticut. Auxiliary Legislative Ambassador, Mercy Woolfolk from Illinois. And our VFW Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief's wife, Megan Mihelchik from Illinois. Now, our national officers of the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States, our Senior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Harold Hal Roche from Virginia. Junior Vice Commander-in-Chief, Matthew Fritz Mihelchik from Illinois. Adjutant General Kevin Jones from Missouri. Quartermaster General Deborah Anderson from Missouri. Judge Advocate General J. Douglas Doug Whitaker from Nebraska. Surgeon General Curtis Doc Bowman from Oklahoma. Our National Chaplain, James Jim Jenkins from Kansas. National Chief of Staff, Paul R. Phillips from Delaware. Inspector General Dwayne T. Sarmiento from New Jersey. And our Chairman of the VFW National Legislative Committee, Ronald Rosakowitz from Connecticut. Director, VFW National Legislative Service, Carlos Fuentes from Maryland. Director, VFW National Veterans Service, Ryan Gallucci from Maryland. I would also like to recognize the VFW Student Fellows. These student veterans exemplify the future leaders of our great nation. And finally, we have many of our past commanders and chiefs with us and representing our great organization. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, for allowing me to introduce our leadership team.
Thank you, Executive Director B.J. Lawrence. Now I'd like to introduce my colleague, Congressman Tom Reed, to introduce our special guest, Congressman Reed.
Well, thank you very much, Chairman Takano, and to the Chairman Moran and the ranking members, Senator Tester and Dr. Rowe, my colleague in the House. Doc, I've been looking forward to this for a little while. I get to introduce you.
That's scary.
I know it is.
Yeah.
Because I was so concerned, because this guy right here works for me, if you guys didn't know that. But he's not caused any national incidents or international incidences as he's traveled around the world. So let's not break that tradition today. So I just first want to continue the tradition of recognizing the VFW and those members of New York who may be in the room today. And we get a round of applause for our New York VFW members. Woo! Chairman and ranking members, I come here today as a proud member of the Sons of the VFW. My 11 older brothers and sisters were taught in our family the lessons of my father. My father served in World War II and Korea, multiple Purple Hearts, Silver Star recipient, and I will just tell you, when he passed when I was 2, I don't have any independent recollection of him. But I do know, as I sit and stand in Fort Sheridan at his burial site, that the lessons that he installed in our family are deep when it comes to military tradition and military commitment. I know firsthand, watching my mom raise the 12 of us with the brothers and sisters from her military extended family that helped and that came together in her time of need to raise us. But more importantly, the lesson that was taught from my dad and from my mom to us is that when it comes to our veterans, you stand with our veterans not only when they're deployed, but also, and just as most importantly, you stand with their families, not only when they're deployed, but also when they come home. And we stand with them till their dying day. And I will tell you that we have carried that commitment in our term in Congress because we have people like Doc Schmitz. We have people like Doc Schmitz, who is a true leader when it comes to veteran services. His national leadership in regards to the VFW post that he now serves in as its National Commander-in-Chief. And I just got to tell you, I've known Doc for many years now. And I met him, and I'll never forget the first time I met him. My predecessor's tenure in Congress was coming to an end. And we met on a street right outside of my church in his car. And he had indicated to me that he wanted to potentially stay with our office. He recognized that it was a Democratic office, and I was a Republican coming into that office. And when we had that conversation sitting in his car, I looked Doc in the eye and I said, Doc, you are someone who is committed to vets. I don't care if you're a Democrat. I don't care if you're a Republican. I share that commitment, and I would be honored if you stayed in our office. And that's now started a 10-year relationship where Doc and I talk incessantly about veterans issues, veterans constituent cases. He still is on my staff. He will call me at many of the state conventions. He will call me from VFWs where he's maybe having a couple cocktails in the thing, and we will get signed onto legislation in real time. Because as I tell Doc, you're my eyes and ears when it comes to veterans issues. And if Doc tells me that it's a priority for a vet, I can tell you we will sign on and stand with Doc Schmitz and the VFW to make sure that their priorities are enacted. And so Doc served honorably in the United States Marine Corps from 1966 to 70. He joined the VFW in our hometown post of Post 524 in Corning, New York, in the year of 1971. And that's a year very important to me because, as Doc knows, that's the year of my birth. So that tells you how old this guy is. And you're not honoring the facial hair policy of our office. You got to shave that mustache off. No, that's part of his shtick.
Maybe tomorrow.
Yeah, that's part of his shtick. But I will just turn it over to you, Doc Schmitz, and to you, Senator, and to the members of this committee. You can't have a better set of eyes and ears in the veterans community than the National Commander of the VFW and all of the members of the VFW that are represented here today. But in particular, Doc, it's an honor to have you on our staff, and it's an honor, most importantly, to call you a friend. Welcome. Love you, Doc.
Thank you, Congressman Reed. Commander Schmitz, you are recognized for 10 minutes to present your opening statement.
I'll time it. Thank you, sir.
Yeah.
Congressman Reed, you said a lot of good stuff about me, but you're the best. You're community-oriented, and I'll tell you what, you couldn't ask for a better guy to represent the district. He is in the district, about the people, taking care of business, and he listens before he jumps. Thank you very much, sir. Appreciate that. Chairman Moran, Takano, Ranking Member Tester and Rowe, it is my pleasure to represent 1.6 million members of the Veterans of Foreign Wars and its auxiliary. I have the honor of visiting veterans, service members, and their families around the world, from Eureka, Montana, to New York City, and all the way to Jerusalem. What I've witnessed is impressive. A selfish commitment to defend our country while in uniform, and millions still serve long after leaving military service. Your work impacts us every day. That's why the VFW thanks you for effectively securing the Pass the Blue Water Navy Vietnam Veteran Act. Additionally, 65,000 military survivors can now focus on healing from the loss of their loved ones and taking care of their families and not worried about struggling to pay their bills. This was made possible by the elimination of the widow's tax. However, there is a long list of to-dos. The brave men and women who wear the national uniform are asked to serve in the most dangerous environments on earth. They faithfully follow their orders with an implicit understanding that America will take care of them when they return home. Vietnam veterans did our part. After winning every battle they fought while in Vietnam, many of them have lost their fight to the horrors of health conditions they received from the exposure of Agent Orange. It's unacceptable that the list of conditions presumed to be associated with Agent Orange exposure do not include bladder cancer, Parkinson-like syndromes, hypertension, and other conditions that scientists have said are connected to military service. But VA keeps on not acknowledging it. Congress and the VA must get together and take care of their veterans. While we're at it, we need to set up a process to ensure the never happens again. It's time for Congress to benefit. Ooh, my page got all screwed up here. Look at that, it won't flip. Bet you never had that problem. Change the framework and prevent benefits for individuals who suffer from conditions associated with toxic exposure, which is why the VFW proposes a permanent, comprehensive, and evidence-based framework for granting presumptive benefits for toxic exposure. For example, veterans who were exposed to burn pits are now suffering from pulmonary conditions and rare cancers, not having to wait, discuss decisions and benefits like the Vietnam veterans did. The VFW proposed processes of granting benefits would require VA to acknowledge the existing research linking these conditions to their service and establish benefits in support by science. It's important to ensure veterans suffer from adverse health conditions related to toxic exposure receive benefits, but acknowledging the science also ensures VA can improve the care that 90% of VFW members use and prefer. The VFW members prefer the VA because they like the quality of care they received. The VA understands and knows how to care for the service-connected disability. And it is their service that has earned them the right to be taken care of by the VA. Our members indicate that the VA healthcare is trending in the right direction. With VFW-supported VA Mission Act less than a year out from implementation, the VA still has a lot of work to do. The number one recommendation of the VFW members on how to improve VA healthcare is to hire more staff. A recent VA Office of Inspector General report agrees with us. It found that staffing shortages and ineffective processes at VA medical centers have led to the veterans waiting an average of, hold on to your hats on this one, 66 days, with 34 of those days waiting for staff to create the authorization. That's a heck of a wait. VA must fill the nearly 50,000 vacancies with high qualified applicants and install reforms that expedite workflow to ensure veterans have timely access to high-quality care they deserve. VFW members are very pleased with the ability to receive urgent care close to home, which was made possible by the VA Mission Act. However, The VFW wholeheartedly disagrees with the VA's decision to charge veterans for service-connected urgent care. VA cannot charge for service care, regardless of where it's given. I am pleased to report, despite a rocky start, VA, by and large, is doing a good job implementing the VFW Championed Appeals Modification Act. Veterans are receiving faster decisions on their claim and their appeals, and legacy appeals waiting to be certified by the board have decreased. What we're concerned, however, that the VA has made bureaucratic-centric decisions which delay the timeliness and accuracy of the claims. For example, VA is requiring veterans to use supplementary claim forms. It should no longer be applied to them. This was done to conform and report requirements and make things easier for the VA, not the veteran. The VFW does not care about VA reporting requirements. We care about the requirements, meaning claims will be delayed months and maybe even years for the veterans submitting the wrong claim? You got to be kidding me. Congress must do its part in making sure the VA has resources it needs in IT, upgrades, and promptly administrating benefits. ITs have been a problem, consistently a thorn in the VA's side. Champion with the implementing of the VFW Champion Forever GI Bill. If VA Education Services had modern IT platforms, errors like the delay in education payment to nearly 200,000 students could have been avoided or at least minimized. To fix overpayment issues and increase oversight, Congress must pass the Protection GI Bill. The VFW has been committed to helping veterans suffering from mental health conditions before they reach the point of crisis through our Unmet Needs Program, Project Atlas, and hosting a Day to Change direction, events which our partners give it an hour. The VFW is leveraging its footprint in communities throughout the world to do our part in reducing the number of veterans who take their own lives. VFW commands the members of the committees that are making efforts to find solutions. This is why we urge Congress to pass the John Scott Hannon Veterans Mental Health Care Improvement Act of 2019, which would make significant strides in improving mental health and suicide prevention efforts. Congress must also pass the Deborah Sampson Act, which would ensure VA is ready and able to care for the fastest growing cohort of veterans population. It would expand availability of women's health services through the VA, improve current care, such as counseling for sexual trauma, and make the VA services more accommodating to women. Life-altering traumatic brain injury also merits serious consideration. I recently toured the Tampa VA Medical Center Post-Deployment and Rehabilitation and Evaluation Program, where medical professionals are helping our special operations get back into the fight by improving functional ability, reducing symptoms, stabilizing psychological distress, restoring confidence, enhancing family relationships, and assisting them in the long-term recovery. VA and DoD must expand this partnership to provide the same opportunity to all of our men and women who continue to face harsh reality of living with TIB. To establish a presumption of service connection of disability is associated with blast exposure. That's a big boom. Congress must push the Blast Exposure Protection Act of 2020. The VFW has long argued that military retirement pay and VA service-connected disabilities compensation are fundamentally different benefits and granted for different reasons. This offset exists to balance the budget on the backs of the American disabled veteran. Congress must enact full concurrent receipt. Since 1929, the VFW has worked alongside the Defense POW MIA Accounting Agency and its predecessors to reunite our fallen heroes with their loved ones. Due to DPAA's efforts, the remains of 203 Americans have been identified in the fiscal year 2018. However, sequestration and continuous resolution prevent from doing more. Congress must pass the DPAA Support Act, which would exempt DPAA employees who are conducting recovery missions from being furloughed in the event of government shutdown. Locating, identifying, recovering the remains of those who paid the ultimate sacrifice is a difficult and hazardous mission. It is a promise to those serving in uniform today that no matter what, we will travel to the ends of the earth to return you home to your families. This includes repatriation of 5,200 service members who never came home from the Korean War. In conclusion, the VFW stands ready to help you improve care and benefits for American veterans, service members, their families, and survivors. To this end, I ask you to dare to care and take care of business. God bless America. Good job, Doc. Thank you. Good job. Thank you. Mr. Reed, thank you. Okay.
Take care, bud.
All right, Chief. Thank you.
Well, thank you for your testimony, Doc Schmitz. Thank you very much. I'm going to recognize myself for 3 minutes for questions. And Commander, can you, I want to have you talk a bit about suicide reduction. And we've heard from VA in the past that they cannot solve veteran suicide alone. It's going to take a concerted effort among VA, the government, and the community, including VSOs, to move the needle on this persistent and stubborn issue. Can you tell me some of the ways in which VFW is contributing? What is the VFW doing?
Sir, we're made sure that we would be at the Atlas grand opening for telehealth, where the veterans in isolated communities can literally get to speak to their healthcare provider via telecommunications. In our communities, we're engaging our communities by going to various VA veterans meetings and working with the health providers to get the word out and to destigmatize any ridicule, any misunderstandings of the mental health issue. Everybody gets depressed. Everybody doesn't feel good all the time, and we need to get that out. We network with each other. We call a buddy up once in a while. How you doing? I haven't seen you in a while. What's going on? And when people are engaged and know people are watching, taking care of them, interacting, that increases their self-awareness and their own personal pride. And hopefully, working strongly with the VA and the advice we get from the health professionals, we can help them get into the community and foster good relationships and drive veterans who are having issues in to get some help.
Well, thank you. Thank you for your organization's commitment. I want to turn to veterans homelessness. You mentioned that for veterans who are on the verge of homelessness, there is little that VA can do or is doing. Many of the benefits that is offered or that are offered require veterans to be on the streets before that they're deemed eligible. How does VFW help these veterans, and how would you improve the benefit programs to catch veterans before they fall? We
have the Unmet Needs Program, which assists veterans who can apply. the hot water heater broke, I couldn't get my rent in on time, things of that nature. It's a real quick thing. They owe us nothing. They don't have to be a member. All they have to be is a veteran or a family member of the veteran who's deployed. They can get a hold of our Kansas office and get some money to help them over the hump.
So you don't actually have to be a VFW member
No, sir, you don't.
to benefit from this VFW program.
That's correct. And that's also with our service officer program to help them file claims, whether it's a widow or a dependent or the veteran themselves. We're free of charge.
Do you have any thoughts, or any of your staff have thoughts about how we could improve the benefit programs to catch people before they fall?
Mr. Galucci, please.
Thanks, Doc. There are a number of ways that we can improve benefits delivery for our veterans. Congress did very well by passing the Appeals Modernization Act, but there are ways, ways that we can improve it. Doc talked about the issue with standard forms, created some bureaucratic hurdles for our veterans in getting through the benefit process. We don't understand why VA went that route, especially with supplemental claims. Another one that we would have to say is improvements to IT infrastructure. The VFW stands ready to assist veterans anytime, anywhere, from any reliable internet connection. And as VA is building self-service tools for veterans to file claims from any internet connection, we stand ready to assist them in doing the same for competent VA-accredited service providers like our VFW service officers.
Well, thank you, Mr. Galucci. My time is up. I now want to call on Dr. Rowe for his questions.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I want to take this, being my last opportunity to be here, to thank Carlos. You really have an outstanding member here, and he's a great advocate for you, and I want to give Carlos Fuentes a shout out. So thanks, Carlos, for your friendship. You know, you mentioned, Commander, you mentioned the VA staffing, and it's not just a VA problem, it's a healthcare issue across the country, staffing. We're going to be 120,000 physicians short in 10 short years, nursing shortages, other healthcare providers, and it's one of the reasons that when we authored the Mission Act, is we realized that both the private sector and the VA sector were going to be short of people, so we had to share those resources, and I'm glad you mentioned telehealth. That's going to be one of the ways we cover those. And the VA has been at the forefront of that. And I've been in many, many VAs across the country, and they're even using it in ICUs, where you'll have someone in at a doctor coverage in an ICU at an off-site where you have critical care nurses and other people to help when they don't have the personnel to. So we're going to have to learn how to do better and share our personnel across the country. Another thing that you that I want to bring up, and you mentioned appeals just a minute ago. When I got to Congress, there were 1 million claims in 2000. It's amazing to me, 1 million backlog claims in this country, and that number is, thank goodness, has been whittled down to a very manageable number now. And Dr. Lawrence wants to have that number completely eradicated by July of this year, which I think the VA needs a shout out for that. That was a huge problem for veterans. I heard it every day, and I know every person up here did when they went home. So I want to give them a shout out. I think one of the things very near and dear to my heart is the VA services for women. I'm glad, and you know, Commander, the VA was set up for basically after World War II for men, because that's who mainly served. And I was trying to think back when I was in my infantry division in the 2nd ID, I don't remember a single female being in it when I was there. Now it's going to be as many as 20% of veterans are going to be women. The good news is 41% of eligible women are using the VA now, as opposed to 48% of eligible men. And I guess I would ask you, what suggestions do you have to make it a more welcoming place, or how would we make it better for the women who are coming there?
Well, the first thing is establish a couple of committees where you get input. What's going right and what's going wrong, and get that to the appropriate people, the director of the specific facility in relation to whatever. And I commend you for recognizing the fact of the medical shortages on availability of hiring, but like in yourself, when you retire from this wonderful job, you might re-engage and do telehealth, because you could literally operate right out of your home.
I'm going to the first tee box I can find. Thank you for being here, Commander. I really appreciate that. I yield back.
Thank you, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Rowe. I now call on not Dr. Pappas, but Mr. Pappas for 3 minutes.
Almost gave me a promotion there. Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman and Ranking Member, and to the members of this committee. And I really appreciate your words, Commander, a really stirring testimony that you gave us here this morning. And it's evident that you represent the passion of so many individuals in this room that have given so much to this country. So I want to salute the leadership of the VFW and auxiliary, as well as the membership who are here, who are so effective in delivering this message. And I think something you said stuck with me. This is about not making it easier on VA, but about making sure the end veteran who put everything on the line for this country is central and is always central to what we're doing on this committee and ultimately how we're serving those who have sacrificed. So thank you for delivering that message loudly and clearly. It is received, and we want to do all we can to implement this agenda. I want to give a shout out to my New Hampshire folks who are here in the room. Please stand up and be recognized if you're here. Thank you very much. Great to see you guys. Our small but mighty state does well caring for veterans, so we appreciate your attendance here today. One of the issues that our Subcommittee Oversight and Investigations has looked into on the House Veterans Affairs Committee is the issue of provider networks and ensuring that as community care rolls forward with Mission Act, that we're attracting providers, that they're being paid in a timely fashion, so that community care can open doors to our veterans to receive care in communities near them. That's very crucial, especially in rural districts like mine. So I'm wondering, as you look at the VA's budget request for fiscal year 2021 and community care specifically, if you feel like the resources are there to provide the back office support and the framework that's needed to ensure that Mission Act can succeed.
Thank you, sir. Mr. Florences, please.
The VFW is proud to partner with DAV and Paralyzed Veterans of America to produce a veterans-specific budget request or recommendation called the independent budget. And we feel that VA is about $4 billion short, specifically on medical care. And we do feel that they need more money to be able to hire more folks, but also implement important legislation like the expansion of the caregiver program.
Thank you for the response. One of the other things I noted in the testimony, you mentioned transition assistance program in the written testimony, and I'm wondering if you could elaborate a little bit on some of the changes we're seeing, any concerns you might have as that moves forward.
Mr. Galucci?
Thanks, Doc. So the VFW has a presence on 25 military installations through the Benefits Delivery at Discharge program. So we were able to gather real-time information on what service members are seeing as they leave the military. We're thankful for the changes that came through the NDAA, making sure that service members had to choose a track. One of the issues that I have to go back to, though, is the parameters that Department of Veterans Affairs has put on service members getting out to file their benefit claims. We used to have the BDD, Benefits Delivery at Discharge, or BDD program in Quick Start, where a service member, anytime from 180 days to separation, could file their benefit claim. VA sunset the Quick Start program and moved the goalpost back from 180 to 90 days. What we see is that many times the mission dictates that service members can't meet the strain of that 90-day period to file their benefit claims. Looking at our numbers, probably about, I want to say about a quarter or a third of our claims are excluded from the BDD program, even though we're filing them on base for a service member. Don't understand why VA went back on those programs, but I think here we are a couple of years later, it's time to revisit this and make sure that we're setting up transitioning service members for success.
Thanks for your comments. I appreciate that, and just to reiterate, we are here to serve you. Thank you for delivering the message loudly and clearly. I yield back, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Mr. Pappas. I now call on Senator Tillis for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you all for being here. I actually want to talk and maybe just go down the line and ask a pretty, well, first off, I should say I met with my, do we have any folks that are either from North Carolina or spend some time in North Carolina when you were in service? If you're out there, stand up.
A lot of them.
I had the opportunity to meet with some of the gentlemen yesterday, and we were talking about some just incredible cases. The work that you all do for veterans is amazing. But one thing that I would really encourage you to do, and I'm sure I speak for every other member, I hear these cases where you're helping veterans get the benefits that they deserve, and I appreciate you doing that, but make sure that you call on our office to do it first. Don't call on our office when it gets hard. Call on our office to do this casework. That's our job. We've done thousands of cases in North Carolina, so I want to make sure you all have the opportunity to cast a wider net and find other veterans who aren't getting the service. So put the burden on us to do that casework first. And if we can't, or if there are particularly complex cases, then maybe they can use your resources. But make sure that you task us with doing the job, because that's a key part of what we're supposed to do. And I would appreciate you all casting a wider net. Now, I think in the limited time, I would just like to ask you all, what more can we do to cast a wider net? How do we find those veterans who are not in the VA that need benefits and need help? What more do you think we can do as a matter of work within the Congress to get out to those folks who aren't connected to the VA, the more than half the people who commit suicide every single day who have no connection to the VA? Tell us what we should be focusing on as a matter of policy to cast a wider net and do the right thing by our veterans. And we'll just start down the line here.
Thank you, sir. I think what we're doing in the Veterans of Foreign Wars, and I think it's very important for all of us to do, and that's, of course, to get the word out, to let veterans know that there is competent, compassionate medical health care for them in the VA system and help for their families if they need that. And so I think that it's a big thing to make sure that the veterans coming out, when they're transitioning out, that that's available to them, that be told to them, and that they understand that they're welcome in the VA system, they and their families. And I think that's very important.
As y'all go down the line, I chair the Personnel Subcommittee on Senate Armed Services, and what I want to do is figure out what more we can do in transition to make sure that we're doing our part to get them connected and make sure they're taking their benefits.
Okay. Thank you, Senator Tillis. I think in the Transition Assistance Program, making sure that service members have access to the classes and the briefings in a timely manner. Again, operations will sometimes dictate, we see this a lot with the Navy, that service members can't get into their transition classes as quickly enough. VA also shouldn't be afraid to lean on DOD should not be afraid to lean on non-military entities to assist, the way that we do on the installations that we serve, but also for for service members who are looking to go to college after they leave the military, just take advantage of all the resources that they have and make sure that service members go to TAP early, that they know that they can go often, that there are people there to answer their questions, and that their family members can attend as well.
Mr. Gallucci hit it right on the head. But you want to catch them before they go, which means you've got to talk to the guys and gals while they're in the military and educate them what's available after. The follow-up is what about the ones that we haven't caught? The Vietnam veterans who won't come forward, the Korean War veterans who won't come forward, maybe Iraqi and Afghan, Beirut. When you legislators pass good legislation that VSOs have encouraged you to pass, that sends a message to all of the ones that are out there that are not in service now to maybe you qualify or come under this, which drives them to our service officers, who drives them to the VA, and now we got them. We've got them. But you folks have to follow through with passing good legislation like the Vietnam Agent Orange thing. How many years did we wait for that? When that finally came out, the guys and gals that were coming down with the specific problems medically, now they've got a place to go, and it explains what the heck was wrong with them to start with. And thank you very much for doing some of that stuff. So each and every one of you, thank you.
Thank you, Senator Tillis, for your questions. I now want to call on the chairwoman of our Health Subcommittee and the Women's Veterans Task Force, Julia Brownlee.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And Commander, I want to thank you for your 4 years of service as a Marine. And even more importantly, I want to thank you for your lifetime of service to our country and to the veterans throughout our country. So, and I say thank you to you, and I say thank you to your family, because I know your family support is very important in all of your endeavors. So I appreciate it very, very much. And to the California VFW members who are here, welcome and thank you for being here. And I thank each and every one of you in this room for your service to our country. We deeply, deeply are very, very grateful for it. So, Commander, I thank you very much for mentioning the Deborah Sampson Act in your testimony, and it's an important, comprehensive bill. We're hoping very much, knock on wood, that the Senate's going to take some action. Any help you can give us on that, I would appreciate it very, very much. But I just wonder if you could just sort of weigh in for a moment on just what you believe some of the longer-term challenges are that VA faces to prevent women from receiving adequate services within the VA. I think we are still working with the Veterans Women's Task Force. We're still working on making the VA a welcoming a place. Talk about stigma with mental health issues. I think sometimes there is a fear of women sometimes entering a VA facility for fear that they won't be recognized as veterans, or maybe just perceived as sort of second class of veterans. But from your perspective, what do you think are some of the challenges?
Some of the challenges are perspective, and I'm sure everybody who's familiar with Zumba. Two young ladies came out from Zumba to get a beverage, and I walked up to them and said, hi, how are you? And I said, are you two veterans? And one young lady got very indignant and said, why would you ask me that? I says, well, because you're like in a veterans VFW post. And the other one looks at it, well, we are. I said, well, that's good. Where did you serve? They served in Afghanistan and stuff like that, so we shot the breeze. Bottom line is how it works with me is I don't care what your gender is. If you served in uniform, it's up to me, like up to you, to make sure I look out for your back and you look out for my back, because we're both veterans. And on that note, I'm going to turn it over to Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Commander. So we believe the VA, of course, is undergoing a transformational move for caring for mostly males to females. Women veterans, as we know, have different needs, which require doctors that know how to treat those needs. Congress, you're absolutely correct, Congress must pass the Deborah Sampson Act to address these important issues.
Thank you.
Now, on the VA side of the house, they must address not just the services it offers, but first and foremost, the way they deliver those services. At the end of the day, that's what matters to our women veterans. Women veterans are more likely than non-veterans to suffer from infertility. Therefore, VA must improve reproductive health services. I think we're on the right track with VA, but I still think we've got a lot of hurdles to overcome. We have to improve privacy issues for our female veterans. They need to feel comfortable when they go in for those services, and certainly the VFW is going to advocate for that to the very end. All of our veterans, no matter gender, should be able to go to a VA facility and receive timely and adequate health care, because that's what they deserve, and that's what we promised them. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Again, I salute you all. Thank you, and I yield back.
Thank you, Ms. Brownlee. I now call on Senator Sullivan for his 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. It's great to be back in front of these wonderful, patriotic Americans. I want to do a shout out to all the Alaskans here. Thank you. How about a round of applause for... Now, I always say, we got more veterans per capita than any state in the country. Senator Tillis from the great state of North Carolina reminds me, his normal rejoinder to that is, well, we have more veterans in North Carolina than you have people in Alaska, which is a pretty good rebuttal, but I'm still proud of ours. So, and my constituents certainly get the the award for coming the furthest. So thank you all again, and I want to thank the leadership team here. I also want to mention VFW Post 9785 in Eagle River, Alaska. That's my VFW post. Hosted Secretary Wilkie for a roundtable recently, so thank you for not just the Eagle River Post, but all the VFW for allowing us to do that. It was a great event. I want to talk very briefly, Commander, just really for the whole panel, but the VFA officially endorsed S2950. That's my Veterans Burn Pit Exposure Recognition Act. And, you know, the whole idea there, we just have been dealing with Agent Orange and the Blue Water Navy, and that's, let's face it, that's all been reactive for decades. What we're trying to do with this bill is to be proactive. We know there's going to be challenges. Let's get in front of it. So what else can we be doing now on the issue of burn pit exposure?
Well, the first thing is we got to get on it as quick as possible, otherwise we're going to lose a lot of good veterans like we did with Agent Orange before they figured out what the heck they ought to do.
So your priority is to get the Senate 2950 passed first.
Yes, and Mr. Fluences has got some information on that.
Senator, thank you very much for introducing that bill, and that will certainly address some of the hurdles we see now for veterans exposed to burn pits to receive benefits. We certainly support your bill and urge passage, but what we really need is a permanent, comprehensive framework to take a look at the anecdotes and then take it to benefits, take a look at the research, and essentially evaluate. We have enough evidence to now provide benefits, right?
Okay.
We need those presumptive benefits. Your bill goes a long way, but we still need to establish the presumptive benefits. We don't have a framework now, and we propose to establish a framework not only for Agent Orange, which was successful for Agent Orange, but one that would be forward-looking to take a look at what's out there now, but also set it up in place so that Congress doesn't have to address each individual exposure when it pops up.
Thank you for that. We look forward to working with you, Mr. Chairman. I know my time. I know my time is up, but I did want to just mention, since we have two strong veteran supporters there, and Senator Sinema and Representative Brownlee. Yesterday, Senator Sinema and I introduced the Reduced Unemployment for Veterans of All Ages Act, which I think the VFW is looking at as one of their priorities as well. And Representative Brownlee is the House lead on that. So I think we have a good team right here on one of your other top priorities. And I'm going to submit some questions, additional questions for the record. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator. I now call on Congressman Cisneros for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank you to all the representatives from the VFW that are here today. If anybody here is here from Southern California, would love to have you stand up and be recognized. Really? There we go. There we go. So my father's a Vietnam veteran, and he's a lifetime member of the VFW. I'm a proud Navy veteran as well, and I just recently, this year, finally purchased my lifetime membership with the VFW, so proud to be a member. So, Commander Schmitz, you mentioned in your testimony about the importance of the adoptive automobile grant. Can you expand on that, like some of the things, why that's important, and what you're hearing from your membership on that issue?
I'll defer to Mr. Fuentes again. Thank you.
What we've seen is that, again, disabilities tend to get worse, and the automotive grant is an excellent way to adapt vehicles to ensure that severely disabled veterans can drive. However, the life of a vehicle is about 10 years. Life of disability is for the life of that veteran. So we have several members who have had to purchase other vehicles and adapt them from their own pocket. And we fully believe that this benefit should be repetitive and folks should be able to use it for multiple times. not just at one time.
Well, I wanted to let you know today I'm working on legislation that hopefully amend the VA Adoptive Vehicle Grant Program to allow veterans to qualify for a new vehicle every 10 years, like you just stated. And this is directly due to, you know, the issues that we've heard from the VSOs like yourself, like the VFW, and hearing from veterans constituents in my district as well. So this is definitely a need that we need to make sure that we take care of. And just to kind of change gears here real quick, something that I've been working on is really that transition out of military service into becoming a veteran. I think we can do better with the TAP. That's why one of the reasons I actually started a caucus focused on TAP. But I would love to hear from you. What can we learn from the VFW that the DOD, that the different services could, you know, put into their TAP classes that's not there right now?
Mr. Lawrence.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros. So I just recently returned from Naval Base San Diego and Fort Bragg, and I had an opportunity to see some of the TAP classes and programs in place. Following up on earlier statements from our commander, one of the first problems we noticed with the TAP classes is we recognize that the individual combatant commanders have the authority to place mission first. That's highly affecting the military member from getting into that TAP class in that allotted window, and also give them an opportunity to be exposed to the services. We think that information as it pertains to VSOs is still highly vital in those TAP briefings. We understand and recognize that early on there were some problems with some contracts as it pertains to the presenters, the private contract vendors that present the TAP classes. But our understanding is that that's now being addressed and hopefully should be ironed out. Bottom line is we've got to force a way that military member can get through that program in enough time. Just joint Naval Base San Diego, for an example, 9,000 transitioning service members every year. Mm-hmm. That's a lot of service members transitioning from the military out into society. We owe it to them to set them up for success and give them the best possible opportunity to transition to civilian life.
Yeah, I couldn't agree more, and I will tell you, as long as I'm here in Congress, I'll continue to work on that issue. And I just want to thank you all that are here today for your service to our country. Thank you. And I yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Cisneros. I now call on Senator Bozeman for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. And thank all of you all for being here. Where are my Arkansas guys? Very good. We appreciate them as being so representative of you. They do a tremendous job in our state. Thank you for being here. We appreciate the hard work. We work really hard as a committee in a very bipartisan way, both on the Senate side and the House side. I've had the opportunity to serve on both committees. But we can't do it without the grassroots. And as you look around the room and you see standing room only, that's impressive. Thank you for doing that. I know it's a hassle for you all to come, but again, that's what it's all about. The other thing is, I see the auxiliary. Thank you all. We know who does all the work. So a big special shout out to you all. But I want to thank you for one thing. I want to thank you for your advocacy regarding veteran suicide. We're trying to do things a little bit differently. A number of the people that are committing suicide don't have touch with the VA. So with your help, we're trying to make it such that we do a better job of working through community programs that are doing a good job so that we identify those people and then get them into the VA, get them help through other aspects. The other thing is that we're working very, very hard. Right now we're measuring suicide success, not on the number of people committing suicide, but access and throwing money at it. And so that's got to change. We're spending a lot of additional funds, and yet we're not seeing the rate go down significantly. So we want to measure, those programs that are working well. We want to beef up. Those that aren't working well, we need to get rid of them. But I'd like to ask you a little bit about one thing that's hugely important, and that's health care for women's veterans. The total population of women veterans is expected to increase at an average rate of about 18,000 women per year for the next 10 years. Mr. Schmitz, what are some of the key areas where we can increase resources and expand upon previous efforts to best meet the future needs of women's veterans?
By hiring more professionals specific to anatomical differences, i.e. OBGYN. There's an incidence, the female veteran population is more susceptible to birth defects than the males, just for biological reasons. Other things is user-friendly environments, create a local committee, a veterans committee in a respective VA that might not have one. I found most of them do have one, though, and engage in a conversation with not only the health professionals, but the veteran community itself, and get expression stuff, female veteran committee going, and make sure on these committees you have a few females on there to give good input to increase the discussion. And with that, we'll move forward, providing you keep giving them money to do it.
Right.
So remember, give them money.
Money's important. And then again, we need to measure what's working. And then the other thing that's so important that you all are helping with is just the idea that now, sadly, occasionally a woman will be in a VA hospital and somebody will come up and ask where their husband's at, And so we're getting away from those kind of things. And again, that's because of a change in attitudes and you all are very helpful in that regard too. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Bozeman. I call on Senator Tester for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Chairman Takano, and I want to once again thank you all for being here. And I would also be remiss if I didn't point out that money should never be an excuse when it comes to taking care of our veterans. If you can't take care of them, you ought not send them off to war to begin with. So. Commander Schmitz, I'll ask this question. You can answer or you can defer to anybody you want, of course, you know that. But I will tell you that to say that the VA has botched implementation of the caregivers expansion would be a compliment. It has not gone well. It is a huge disappointment to me that the VA hasn't kept to the schedule that it laid out in 2018 when we passed the VA Mission Act. The VA are telling us that they haven't put into place an IT system that can support the expanded caregivers program. That's just totally not acceptable. So, Commander Schmitz, from your point of view, could you tell us what it means to disabled veterans and their caregivers, many of them elderly, many of them shouldering this burden for far too long themselves, to wait even another month for caregiver benefits?
You're darn right on that one. It's sad. And who has more specific feedback on that is Carlos Fuentes.
Caregivers give up their jobs to care for their loved ones. And it's completely demeaning that this program is not expanded to pre-9/11 veterans. The Secretary promised last week that he would put out the regulations this week, and again, we haven't seen it. So hopefully that's not delayed, but we certainly appreciate your support to keeping the pressure on. It shouldn't be delayed any further. Folks are suffering. We need that support, and it needs to be expanded now.
Yeah, I mean, I think for a quality of life standpoint, that speaks enough, but it may cost a little money up front to get this thing going. I think long-term it's going to save the VA dollars and it's going to improve quality of life for veterans. So time is of the essence. Really quickly, Commander, I want you to talk about the electronic health records. Has the VA requested your input on electronic health records?
Well, we'll talk to the man that receives the call, Mr. Gallucci.
All right, thank you, Doc. This is, we were expecting it to expand to man grant staff in Spokane later this month. That was delayed. I would like to think, and was confirmed a little bit earlier this week by some of our comrades, that the VFW helped to play a role in that. What we heard from VA is we've done extensive outreach to VSOs, provided training, so the VSOs are very well aware of what's going to happen at man grant staff. So naturally, We reached out to our network of VA voluntary service volunteers who volunteer at the hospital. I think one of them is here, Jerry Herker from the state of Washington. Also, our service officers who operate out of the Spokane Vet Center. They hadn't heard anything. Jerry pulled me aside at this conference and said, hey, BJ, Ryan, I got to give you some credit because we were finally reached out to and briefed on what's going to happen with the expansion of the EHRM at Man Grandstaff. They were behind the 8 ball. They need to communicate better with the VSOs because we have that community reach, we have the boots on the ground, and that's the only way that this is going to get done and done right.
I just want to say this. Thank you very much for making sure that your voice is being heard. We'll help you on that, too. I've got respect for the leadership in the VA. I think they want to do the right thing. I think their strings are being pulled by other people, and I don't want to let Wilkie off the hook or Stone off the hook or any of those guys. But the bottom line is that the VA needs to understand that we're all on the same team, and that if we work together, we can live up to our promises we've made the fighting men and women of this country. Thank you, Commander. Thank you, everybody who's in the room today.
Thank you, Senator Tester. I now call on Mr. Bilirakis for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I appreciate it so much. I'll be as brief as I can. I know I only have 3 minutes. Commander Schmitz, as you know, acting full concurrent receipt for disabled military veteran retirees has been a priority for the VFW for years, and again, a priority of mine for many years, as it was a priority for my father. And he really made a lot of progress in this area. So how do these unfair offsets impact your members, sir?
Well, part of it, well, obviously it's financial, but it's great to retire. It's a wonderful thing. But then when you find out that all of a sudden you've acquired a disability that possibly forced you out of the military and forced you to retire, you didn't seek it out, it happened to you. And then when you compromise somebody because of that, that's first of all demoralizing. It's like, what happened to that? And they're two different things that are given for two separate reasons. And I think it should have never happened to start with, and I commend you for taking point on this and trying to drive this thing back where it ought to be. Bottom line is you should, if you are entitled to both, you should get both without either of them being compromised. It's not fair, it's not right. And some of that money that particular veteran gets, it goes back into the local system, which some of it gets taxed that goes back to where it came from to start with. So, I mean, it's not a all win on one end of the street. Bottom line is, the guy or gal that was compromised gets taken care of. And God bless you for taking point on that, sir.
Thank you. Thank you. I appreciate that. And we filed, as you know, the Major Richard Starr Act, and I'm grateful for the VFW taking the lead on this, and we need several co-sponsors in the House, and I know there's a Senate bill too. I believe Senator Tester is the sponsor, as well as Senator Tillis. It restores retirement benefits for Chapter 61 veterans who were wounded in combat. Again, elaborate if you can. I think you've done a pretty good job, and tell us why this bill should be a priority.
Mr. Fuentes.
Thank you, Congressman, again, for taking the lead on this bill. As he pointed out, taking care of full concurrent receipts will be about $30 billion over 10 years. However, Congress should chip away at this unjust benefit by first eliminating the offset for those who were discharged through their combat service. It's important that we show some progress. It's important that we don't allow this to just continue to stay idle like it has for so many years, and thank you for that. And you have the VFW's full support to do what it takes to get it past the finish line.
Thank you so much, and let's get this done. I appreciate, Mr. Chairman, for your time, and I'll yield back.
Thank you, Mr. Bilirakis. I now call on Senator Sinema for 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Greetings to the Arizona veterans who've joined us today, and thank you to our witnesses for being here. It's been my pleasure to work with the VFW to ensure that service members and veterans receive the care and benefits they've earned. And I'm proud to have introduced the Senate companion to the Reduce Unemployment for Older Veterans Act with Senators Sullivan, Hoeven, and Senator Tillis. This bill eliminates the 12-year eligibility period for vocational rehabilitation and employment services. And special thanks to Congresswoman Brownlee for her leadership with the House bill. And I look forward to working with the committee to pass this legislation. My first question is for Commander Schmitz. VFW has been a strong advocate to remove the 12-year eligibility period for the vocational rehabilitation and employment services. What is the impact of this benefit for disabled veterans, and why is removal of the eligibility period so important?
It's important, as we all know. You acquire a disability. With aging process alone, you become more and more compromised. Things become more and more difficult. They tend to overflow medically into other issues. The individual, in order to be vibrant in the community, vibrant at home, needs to be able to be as mobile as possible, given any circumstances that you can provide whatsoever to help them accommodate themselves to get to a new job, modify their training so they can qualify for now all of a sudden, I can't do the walking required in this particular job. How can I transition and be trained into a job where I can still get there, but I'm going to have to sit in a chair for quite a while to do it? This is critical to keep them active in the community and as an active, productive person in our society. And it's a thank you very much for being compromised. We're going to do the best we can continually as you live. And Mr. Lawrence will continue on that.
Thank you. VRNE provides critical counseling and other adjunct services necessary to enable service-disabled veterans to overcome barriers as they prepare for, find, and maintain gainful employment. Service-disabled veterans must have the opportunity to use VRNE services at any point, I stress, at any point during their employable lives when service-connected disabilities interfere with their employment and when economic changes require them to learn new skills. The VFW hears commonly from veterans that they didn't even apply for VRNE because they did not think they were eligible due to that 12-year limitation. We've got to change that. Thank you.
Thank you. Commander Schmitz, in your statement, you indicated that the VFW is concerned that the amount of time to process an authorization for a veteran to receive care in the community is taking far too long. I wholeheartedly agree. This is what we hear at our office as well. It's unacceptable that a veteran whose clinician has authorized a community care consult is waiting nearly a month or even longer to have their appointment with the provider scheduled. Not to get the appointment, to get the appointment for the appointment. So this was meant to be a seamless process. How do we fix this problem?
Increase their IT functions, bring them up to speed, turn a lot of the stuff over to the community VA. They know the local health providers. Some of them actually work at the VA or are recipients of a referral. They know the local weather and when you'd want to send somebody where for what. In one place in New York, the scheduler at one time scheduled this guy to go for his appointment. It was in the middle of the winter, and the roads and stuff were not real good. Bad choice. Another one, they sent him to the wrong eye doctor 3 times because the eye doctor didn't do the procedure necessary. But you had clerks who had no medical background making an appointment. So you need to engage the local VA, to engage the local health providers. They know what they've got out there. They live in the community, and they know the doctors and nurse practitioners or PAs that they could get appointments with.
Thank you.
Thank
you, Mr. Chairman. I yield back.
Thank you, Senator Sinema. I now call on Mr. Lamb for his 3 minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, and thank all of you. I want to especially recognize the Pennsylvania delegation that came by my office yesterday. I don't know what sins you committed between now and then that they didn't give you a seat to sit in here today, but just rest assured that I'm proud of you for whatever it was. Gentlemen on the panel, I wanted to ask about the 4 conditions that have been denied presumptive status for Agent Orange. I'm sure others have probably covered this before I got here, but I represent a very large population of Vietnam veterans, some of whom are suffering from these conditions, particularly hypertension, I think, is very common. We have spoken to Secretary Wilkie as recently as last week. We've all conveyed how disappointed we are in what's happening. I get the sense that most of the opposition is in the White House at OMB, more so than in the VA. But regardless, I was just hoping someone on our panel today could talk about whether you know and represent veterans suffering from these 4 conditions as well, and what it is doing to their lives and to their morale that they have not been given this presumptive status just yet.
Well, to start with, sir, I'm one of them, and I'm a mushroom farm for skin cancer. I'm also a registered nurse by profession. These conditions, someone once said, well, the Agent Orange thing has expired. Well, you know something? So are my brother and sister Vietnam veterans expiring. And we need to, science is substantiated, there is a correlation, undeniable, between those conditions. Why the VA is dragging their derriere in relation to addressing them, before there's no one to address them to, I'm totally baffled. Mr. Lawrence, could you expound on that, please?
Thank you, Commander. So our argument has been all along, the scientific evidence already meets the established statutory requirements to add the 4 to the presumptives. As the Commander said, sometimes we feel like we've gone through the same battle before with Agent Orange. As he mentioned, our Vietnam veterans are getting older in age. It's almost like if we kick the can down the road long enough, we won't have any Vietnam veterans to take care of.
That's the impression, absolutely.
And by the way, Mr. Lamb, by the way, Vietnam veterans make up close to 60% of our membership in the Veterans of Foreign Wars of the United States.
Absolutely, and
It's
a
time to take care
growing
them
share
and
of the
get this
VA
passed.
population. Just in my remaining seconds, for anyone who hasn't seen these numbers, this is not about money. It should not be about money because of the service that these Vietnam veterans have rendered. Thank you. I didn't even get to my point yet. The VA is requesting a $22 billion budget increase just this year alone. And they've projected that the 5-year cost of taking care of these veterans is $11 to $15 billion. So they want, OMB is approving $22 billion increase in a single year and denying a smaller $11 to $15 billion cost over the next 5 years. That's really important for everyone in this room to know. It's not about money. It's not about fiscal responsibility. It's about which veterans you want to take care of when, and they are waiting you out, and that's wrong, and we're going to keep the pressure on them. Thank you, gentlemen, all for being here. And I yield back.
Comrade Chairman, I do have one comment.
Sure.
I can speak freely for the Vietnam veterans. We do not want to see the same thing that happened to us in relation to Agent Orange happening to our brothers and sisters with TBI and our brothers and sisters that were exposed to burn pits. We are firm on that. We want this addressed now before many of them die. Thank you, sir.
Thank you. Commander, as chairman, I hear you loud and clear. I want to thank Mr. Lamb for taking on this issue in such a dogged way. I believe this issue needs to be made too hot to handle. Who wants to touch it is going to get burned unless they do the right thing. So thank you so much for your advocacy. I'm told that Chairman Moran does not have questions. I want to thank you from the bottom of my heart for you, all of you, making the journey to Washington to exercise your constitutional rights, your democratic rights, to petition Congress, to make your voices heard. I want you to know that you, the Veterans of Foreign Wars, as a nonpartisan organization of veterans, the fact that you're veterans, you have a voice that's very special. It's a moral voice. It's a voice of conscience. And as Senator Tester said, if we don't have the money to care for our veterans, we shouldn't be sending them to war in the first place. I wholeheartedly associate myself with that sentiment. It's not about money. It is about what's doing right by you. And as chairman, I'm determined to make sure that these 4 conditions are listed as presumptive, and I thank you for your advocacy. So with that, I want to just call this hearing to a close. Before I do that, all members will have 5 legislative days to revise and extend their remarks and include extraneous material. Thank you again for your presentation, and this hearing is now adjourned.
Well done. Thanks.